So I want to do a second round of questions for anybody who wants to do it. As I mentioned in my opening statement, and Senator Kaine referred to it, there was a recent investigation by the Washington Post and POGO that found that hundreds of retired military officers have gone to work for foreign governments. And Senator Grassley and I launched our own bipartisan investigation. This was not intended to be partisan. We wrote to the Department of Defense. We asked for detailed information about DOD's processes for how they approved of this work and how much these retired officers expected to receive in payment from foreign governments. And what we discovered is that the approval rate from DOD is in excess of 95%, as you underscored, Senator Kaine, and that the officers themselves made a lot of money. An Air Force general working for Saudi Arabia was getting paid $24,000 a month, which just about doubled what he was already receiving from his military pension. What troubles me in particular about this is how hard it is to get the information. Senator Grassley and I were successful because we were able to bear down on it with some Senate elbow grease on this, but the information is not made public. And Washington Post and POGO had to dig this out in other ways. So now that we've got this information, I just want to do a little bit more on the summary. High approval rates by DOD. Ms. Bryan, can you just say a word about the kinds of countries that are employing our former generals, colonels, admirals?
Well, I think that's the thing that was most shocking to me was when we're talking about countries not only that are serial violators of human rights, the United Arab Emirates, for example, with 280 of these people on their payroll, but the fact that we were able to find 4 people who were approved to work for entities owned by China, which is obviously a rival to our country, that to me was what standard are they using to approve these?
Right. So a little troubling about the particular countries that are being approved here. The number of retired officers working for foreign governments was made public by your outside investigation. Can you just say a word about what it would mean if we required from the get-go that any employment by a former high-level Department of Defense official by a foreign government had to be made public and available for anyone in the public to see? What would be the consequence of that in your view?
I think it would be extremely valuable, in part because, remember, these people are not just on the payroll, but as you noted, some of them are very high level, including former national security advisor or the head of the NSA. And then they're also commenting in the media, but it is not also identified in their comments that they are on the payroll of a foreign country. They're just acknowledged as a former national security official, and so the public needs to know, and the Congress needs to know, well, who's paying you for these comments?
Right. And just to make clear, so everybody's kind of following what happens here, does the United States government place restrictions on our ability as a government to help countries, for example, that are identified as having terrible human rights records, or to help the Chinese government, for example?
I mean, there's certainly all kinds of considerations that the State Department and the DOD go into before they are evaluating whether those agreements are agreed to, but in this case, clearly that's not what's happening.
Well, I am particularly concerned that what's happened is this has become a way to bypass those restrictions and to be able to communicate with and influence government and evade the sanctions or the restrictions that are otherwise in place. So thank you again very much. Thank you for initiating this study and bringing this to light so that Senator Grassley and I could follow up and we could do more to highlight what's happening here. Senator Scott, do you have anything more? Senator Kaine? All right, with that, thank you very much, both of you, for being here, and I call up the second panel.